Massachusetts hides secrets darker than you can imagine: vanished children, haunted forests, and ancient symbols that still call to the lost. Ready to uncover what lurks beneath the surface? In the coastal town of Marblehead, Massachusetts, nestled along the rocky shorelines and cobblestone streets, there exists a place where the Atlantic whispers secrets, and the mist clings to everything like it's hiding something ancient. Tourists come for the colonial architecture and salt air, but the locals, especially the older ones, know that beneath the surface lies a history darker than anything preserved in museums. A history riddled with shadows, disappearances, and the things no one dares talk about aloud. It started, as most things in Marblehead do, with the sea. The story of what the town now calls the Listening Tunnels began in the summer of 1974, during one of the worst storms the North Shore had seen in decades. The ocean battered the harbor violently, swallowing boats and flooding the lower streets. When the storm passed, a portion of an old seawall crumbled near Fort Sewell, revealing an opening to a forgotten tunnel buried underneath layers of brick and earth. The entrance was choked with salt and time, but curiosity got the better of a group of teenage boys who had grown up hearing whispers about old smuggler routes and colonial hiding places. What they found wasn't what they expected. The tunnel stretched for yards in both directions. One way sloped toward the sea, the other disappeared beneath the town itself. The walls were damp and coated in a strange, mossy film. Old rusted hooks jutted from the stones, and faint carvings, mostly symbols no one recognized, lined the arching ceiling. The boys only went about 50 feet in before one of them, Paul Stetson, insisted they leave. He claimed to hear voices, muffled and distant, as if coming from below them. The others laughed him off, calling it wind or echo, but none of them could explain the sensation of pressure that built in their ears the deeper they went, like diving too far beneath the waves. That was the first and last time any of the boys entered the tunnel together. A week later, Paul disappeared. It wasn't like him to run away. He was grounded, careful, rarely stepped out of line. His parents reported him missing within hours of his absence. His bike was found leaning against the low stone wall near Fort Sewell. His footprints led to the collapsed tunnel entrance. No sign of struggle. No blood. Just a lingering, musty odor like wet earth and something else. Something sour and metallic. The town launched a small search. Police scanned the tunnels as far as they could safely go. They used dogs, lights, even a camera lowered down with a rope, but nothing turned up. That's when rumors began to circulate. Stories told in hushed tones at bars and coffee shops. Old-timers recalled similar disappearances in the past, though records were always vague or lost. A fisherman in the 1940s. A pair of children in 1913. A sailor back in 1890. Each time, the last known location was somewhere near the shore or Fort Sewell. No one mentioned the tunnels outright. Not then. But something changed in the town after Paul vanished. The seas seemed angrier, storms more frequent. Some said the mist lingered longer, especially near the tunnel entrance. Locals started avoiding that stretch of coastline entirely. It became a silent rule, unwritten but understood. Don't go near the seawall after dark. And never, ever follow the sound of voices. 20 years later, in 1994, the town tried to seal the tunnel for good. A development company wanted to build luxury condos overlooking the harbor, and the old seawall needed reinforcement. During the project, crews uncovered more of the underground network, narrower tunnels branching out like veins beneath the town, connecting to root cellars, old basements, even beneath Town Hall itself. The lead engineer, a man named Mason Clark, began experiencing bizarre symptoms during the excavation. Nosebleeds, migraines, auditory hallucinations. He claimed he could hear whispering behind the walls, something calling to him by name. He didn't show up for work one Monday morning. His coworkers assumed he quit. His wife reported him missing 3 days later. When they searched his home, they found his boots and flashlight gone, along with an old map of Marblehead dated 1724. It showed tunnels no one had ever seen before, routes that went deep, far beyond the limits of colonial architecture. Some passages even dipped beneath the ocean floor, marked with symbols that matched the ones the boys saw back in '74. That was the last straw. The town shut down the project, citing structural instability. The entrance was sealed with concrete and layered over with stone. But locals knew it was only temporary. You can cover a wound, but if the infection is still underneath, it only festers. In 2006, a new family moved into a house on Gregory Street, one of the oldest homes in the area, dating back to 1691. The Carter family had 2 kids, ages 6 and 10. They loved the charm of the historic district and said the house had good bones. But within months, they began hearing things. Not just creaking floorboards or settling pipes, but the sound of soft tapping beneath the floor at night. Whispers through the vents. Their daughter, Maggie, claimed she had an imaginary friend named Paul, who lived under the house and said the ocean missed her. Her parents thought it was cute until she drew a picture of Paul. He was a boy, about 15, with seaweed wrapped around his neck. His skin was gray. His mouth wasn't smiling, just open, as if he was screaming. She said he didn't blink. They sold the house 6 weeks later, refusing to speak about what had happened. Today, Marblehead remains one of Massachusetts' most picturesque towns. But beneath the beauty is a maze of silence and shadow, an underworld carved long before colonists set foot on the shore. Some say it was the work of smugglers. Others claim cultists once used the tunnels for rituals older than the town itself. Rites whispered in a language no longer spoken, sacrifices made to things buried deeper than memory. Every few years, the sea wall gives way again. The wind rises, the mist thickens, and someone else vanishes. They always say the same thing before they go. "Do you hear that? Someone's calling me." And the tunnels listen. When the tunnels beneath Marblehead were quietly closed and memory faded into myth, the rest of Massachusetts moved on, or so it seemed. But dark things don't stay buried forever. They ripple outward, underground currents of secrecy, and dread that find new places to surface. One such place was Dead Horse Hill, just outside of Worcester. It's not the kind of name you forget. The hill is steep and forested, a lonely rise at the edge of the city limits. In the winter, it's a bleak white mound standing watch over the surrounding woods. In the summer, the foliage thickens so heavily that the sky itself seems to vanish beneath the canopy. For centuries, people have avoided the area, especially after sunset. The stories go back to the 1700s, colonial farmers finding their horses mutilated, bleeding out with no tracks around them, their mouths wide open as if they died mid-scream. Others whispered about strange lights that hovered just above the treetops, flickering like lanterns moving against the wind. In 1981, a hiker named Louise Greer vanished on the trails that twist around the base of the hill. She was last seen entering the woods with a backpack and a trail map. Her last known radio transmission was picked up by a local ranger. "Something's wrong here. The air feels thick, and I keep hearing." Then static. No one ever found her. Over the decades, the hill has developed a reputation. Some urban explorers have braved the trails, hoping for a thrill. Most come back shaken. A few don't come back at all. One of those who vanished was Jackson McVeigh. He was a grad student from Boston University, obsessed with Massachusetts' colonial past and the folklore of haunted places. His thesis was titled, "Hidden Pathways, mapping the paranormal topography of the Bay State. He believed there was a network of connected anomalies, underground structures, energy fields, and electromagnetic disturbances that weren't random but intentional. Placed, designed. His obsession began after reading the reports of the Marblehead tunnels. He started mapping out similar phenomena across Massachusetts, areas of missing persons, strange weather, unexplained electrical outages, even animal behaviors. The lines, he believed, formed a kind of pattern, a shape. One of those lines passed directly through Dead Horse Hill. He went alone, armed with a thermal camera, a field recorder, and a GPS tracker. He live-streamed part of his hike, documenting the unnatural silence. No birds, no insects. He showed viewers his compass spinning in slow circles, the way the temperature dropped 15 degrees in less than a minute. And then, the feed glitched. When it returned, only a single frame remained visible, a close-up of the forest floor. Dirt, tangled roots, something that looked like stone, etched with the same symbols found beneath Marblehead. The stream ended. He never posted again. A week later, the state police were brought in. They found his phone shattered, buried beneath a pile of leaves arranged in a perfect spiral. His gear was gone. There were no footprints leaving the area. But something else was found, something buried a few feet down in the soil beneath where his phone had been. An old lantern, still warm. It was a colonial-style oil lantern, the kind used in the late 1600s. The metalwork was bizarrely well preserved. No corrosion. The wick was damp. It smelled of salt. An expert at the Worcester Historical Society inspected the lantern and said something odd. The inscription along its base didn't match any known language, but it bore a passing resemblance to the carvings recovered from the drowned chambers of the Nan Madol ruins in Micronesia, which, of course, made no sense at all. After McVeigh's disappearance, researchers began poring over his notes. They found he'd been in contact with another local historian named Evelyn Callister. She lived in Salem and specialized in pre-Puritan oral history, specifically indigenous folklore that predated European settlement. In a recorded interview transcribed in McVeigh's notes, she mentions a forgotten tribe that once lived near the central part of Massachusetts, whose name had been lost to time. She referred to them only as the Whispers Beneath. They believed in a world beneath this one, where time is thin and breath is stolen. They spoke of doorways that could only be heard, not seen, of watchers in the stone, of the cold voices in the trees that lured people in with names that sounded like their own. McVeigh had drawn one of their symbols in his journal, a spiral made of jagged lines, not unlike a stylized ear or shell. Beneath it, he'd scrawled a phrase, repeated 3 times. The stone remembers. The stone remembers. The stone remembers. That same symbol, according to a maintenance worker at Worcester City Records office, was found scratched onto the concrete wall of a maintenance tunnel 2 miles from Dead Horse Hill. It was carved deep, unevenly, with what looked like fingernails. Since McVeigh's disappearance, there have been 8 new missing persons reports filed in the area surrounding the hill, all of them within a 2-mile radius. All of them last seen either walking their dog, jogging, or exploring the wooded trails. No signs of struggle. No animal tracks. Only one clue, a phone left behind, playing back muffled audio of someone breathing. In reverse. Today, Dead Horse Hill remains off-limits to the public. The city claims it's due to land erosion and dangerous terrain, but the chain-link fences and motion-triggered security lights tell a different story. People say if you stand near the gate long enough, you'll hear a sound like stones shifting far below, like something waking up, or worse, remembering. And across the state, from the Berkshires to the shoreline, more reports emerge. Places where the mist hangs heavy. Places where time bends. Places where people whisper about voices underground that never stop calling. The truth is, whatever lies beneath Massachusetts, it's still there, waiting. There's a legend whispered among old dock workers in Boston, usually after a few drinks, usually after dark. It's about a place that doesn't show up on any modern map. They call it the Lantern Room. Not a building, not a house. A room, standing by itself, deep in the uncharted marshes near Boston Harbor, visible only during specific tides, on specific nights. Some say you can only find it if you're not looking. Others insist it appears when someone is about to disappear. It's said to be made of black stone, impossibly dark, polished like glass, reflecting no light. The windows are tall, narrow slits, and within them, dim lanterns burn with cold blue flame. The room has no visible door. No one claims to have gone inside, but some people have gotten too close. In 2011, a local fisherman named Devin Collis docked his boat after midnight, looking pale and shaken. He told the harbor patrol he'd gotten turned around during a fog that rolled in fast and thick. His GPS went haywire. Compass spun like mad. When the fog lifted, he was in a marsh he didn't recognize, and in the distance, he saw what looked like a floating black box on the water's edge, with flickering lights in its windows. He didn't go toward it. He didn't even move. But he swore, and this was what made the harbor officers call the Coast Guard. He swore he could hear someone whispering his name from inside it. Not shouting, not yelling, whispering, in his grandmother's voice. Devin never went out to sea again. 2 weeks later, he left the state without explanation. His slip was never reassigned. His boat still floats in the harbor, slowly rotting, untouched. The last thing he told a coworker before he left. It knew I was there, and it wanted me. That story might have died like the rest if not for what happened 2 years later. In 2013, a group of urban explorers posted a now-deleted thread on a fringe forum dedicated to abandoned places. The title was short. "We found the Lantern Room." The post included photos, grainy, distorted images clearly taken with a phone or cheap camera. In them, through heavy marsh fog, you could just barely make out the silhouette of a freestanding black structure. No walls leading to it. No surrounding buildings. Just a single room made of stone, glowing faintly from within. The images were hard to interpret, but one detail stood out: carvings along the stone. Spirals. Hooks. Symbols identical to those found in the tunnels of Marblehead and etched in the soil near Dead Horse Hill. The last post in the thread, dated 2 days after the images went up, was from one of the original explorers. It simply read, "It opened." That was the final message. The user's account was deleted. Attempts to trace their IP led to a disconnected address near Revere Beach. Nothing more came from the group again. But copies of the photos still circulate among internet sleuths and horror fanatics. Some call it an ARG, a hoax. But those who've spent time along the coast say otherwise. Lobstermen have reported seeing flashes of blue light out in the harbor at night, low to the waterline, like someone waving a lantern back and forth. Kayakers say they've heard knocking sounds echoing across the marsh, even when there's no wind. And one sailor, an old-timer who refuses to speak on camera, claims he once saw a man standing knee-deep in the water at twilight, unmoving, staring toward the city. His clothes were from another time: dark coat, wide-brimmed hat, and his skin was almost translucent. The man held a lantern in one hand, and what looked like an old mariner's map in the other. When the sailor shouted to him, the man raised the lantern, but no light came from it, just smoke. Thick, black, unnatural smoke that drifted across the water and blanketed the sailor's boat. He passed out cold. When he awoke, he was adrift near Castle Island with no memory of how he'd gotten there. His fingernails were caked in black grit. His watch was gone. His compass had melted. People like to forget these stories. Boston has changed, evolved, built over its past. But the harbor is old, and the land beneath it older still. There are maps in the Massachusetts Historical Society archive that show a structure in the marsh from as early as 1683, marked only with the word Sentinel. No path. No explanation. The cartographer's notes suggest the building did not appear every year. In the centuries since, there have been other references, vague but insistent. A man in 1829 who claimed to see lights dancing upon the black water's edge. A woman in 1906 who wandered barefoot into the marsh on a moonless night, speaking in tongues. A radio transmission in 1943 picked up by naval officers off the coast that consisted of static, a woman singing in Latin, and a voice that simply said, "Open the way." Then silence. If the lantern room exists, and many now believe it does, then it isn't a building at all. It's an opening, a threshold, a pressure point in the skin of reality, one of many across Massachusetts, where the barrier is thinnest, where voices bleed through, where people go missing, not because they're taken, but because they're drawn. Drawn by sound, drawn by memory, drawn by something that knows your name. And across the state, other places resonate with the same symbols, the same whispers, the same cold presence that once haunted Marblehead's tunnels and rippled through Dead Horse Hill. Some say if you gather all the symbols, follow the maps, and wait for the right tide, you can find the lantern room too. But if you do, don't knock. It's already waiting for you. Before the water came, the valley was alive. For towns once sat in the Swift River Valley, Dana, Enfield, Greenwich, and Prescott. By the 1930s, they were erased, sacrificed to create the Quabbin Reservoir, Boston's answer to its growing thirst. The government called it progress. They used dynamite and bulldozers to flatten schools, churches, homes. Cemeteries were relocated. Roads were cut off. Families displaced. The valley was drowned slowly, and when the water rose, it swallowed the past whole, or most of it. Some say the towns were never truly gone, that the land remembered, and when the water settled, it didn't just reflect the sky, it reflected something else, something deeper. The first child disappeared in 1952. His name was Isaac Cray. He was 9 years old. His parents brought him out to the new shoreline on a picnic. He was last seen skipping stones along the reservoir's edge, just past Gate 40. He never came back. There were no screams, no splashes, no signs of struggle. The police dragged the reservoir for days, but no body was ever found. The only thing recovered was one of his sneakers, sitting on the rocks with the laces tied together, placed neatly, as if someone or something had undressed him with care. Over the years, the disappearances continued, quietly, spaced out, all of them children, aged between 6 and 11, always during late summer, always near the water. No signs of abduction, no remains. Officially, they were ruled as drownings. But locals started whispering about the valley that waits, a name given to Quabbin in hushed tones, especially by older folks who remembered the drowned towns. They said you could still hear church bells beneath the surface. That some nights, a faint glow rose from the depths, like candlelight flickering through invisible windows. In 1971, a forest ranger named Milo Fenwick was patrolling the shoreline near the old Enfield lookout when he stumbled upon a strange scene. 3 small stone cairns had been built along the water's edge, each topped with a child's shoe. No footprints around them, just the wet stones perfectly balanced, and a single trail of white sand leading from the trees to the reservoir. There is no white sand anywhere around Quabbin. Milo reported what he saw, but was told not to write it in his report. He ignored the order and submitted it anyway. A week later, he suffered a sudden stroke at home. He survived, but lost all ability to speak. Before the stroke, he'd told his wife something odd, that he'd seen small figures moving between the trees that day, but they weren't animals. They were children, pale, wet, watching him from the pines. In the 1990s, an amateur diver named Ben Cutler illegally entered the restricted section of the reservoir. He wanted to film what was left of the old towns beneath the surface. He went in with a waterproof GoPro, a diving light, and enough oxygen for an hour. He returned 15 minutes later, screaming. His footage was never released publicly, but according to the ranger who detained him, Ben had one sentence he repeated over and over in the holding cell. "They're not sleeping. They're waiting for the bell." When asked what bell, he only cried harder. Researchers later discovered an eerie coincidence. One of the churches submerged in Enfield, the first Congregational, was famous for its bell tower. The bell was removed before the flooding and relocated to another parish, but the bell rope was left behind, hanging. Divers have reported feeling tugged while exploring that part of the reservoir, even when alone. In 2004, a woman walking her dog along the eastern shore said she saw someone waving at her from out on the water. She described it as a young boy, no older than 10, standing barefoot atop the still surface. He didn't move. His skin looked grayish. His shirt was old-fashioned, with wooden buttons. And his eyes? She couldn't describe them, only that they were too wide, too knowing. She blinked, and he was gone. Her dog refused to go near the shoreline after that, and for weeks she claimed to hear laughter at night. Childlike, hollow, coming from the trees. Officially, Quabbin is a pristine wildlife reserve, a triumph of engineering. But if you ask the locals, if you listen between the lines, they'll tell you there's something wrong with the water. That when the wind is just right, and the surface is calm, you can see faint outlines beneath, fences, porches, windows, faces. And sometimes, if you listen hard enough, you'll hear singing. Low, slow, like a lullaby carried through time. A song meant to lead the curious to the edge, and over it. The children who vanished? Some believe they didn't drown. They were called home, and they're still there, beneath the surface, in houses no longer standing, waiting for the next child to answer the melody, to follow the sound that echoes through Massachusetts like a chorus of forgotten voices, whispering through tunnels, hills, harbors, and reservoirs, because the land never forgets, and neither do the children it keeps. Before Gloucester became the idyllic seaside town it's known as today, before the tourists and clam shacks and art galleries, there was Dogtown. Once a thriving colonial settlement, Dogtown now lies in ruin. Dozens of cellar holes scattered through thick woods, remnants of homes long gone. No buildings remain. No rooftops, no windows. Just moss-covered stones and trails that twist in strange, disorienting ways. Locals walk their dogs here. Hikers pass through. But the deeper you go, the more you understand why it was abandoned. Something's wrong in Dogtown. The stories began almost immediately after the last residents left in the early 1800s. The name itself comes from the wild dogs that roamed the ruins, left behind when people fled. They say the final families were widows and outcasts, strange folk who muttered to themselves, built stone altars, and practiced old rituals. Witchcraft, some whispered. Devilry, others insisted. But the most unsettling thing in Dogtown isn't the ruins or the history. It's the stones. In the 1930s, A wealthy philanthropist named Roger Babson, founder of Babson College, began carving messages into massive glacial boulders throughout the area. Words like, "Help Mother," "Use your head," and "Be clean" still decorate the woods like forgotten warnings. He claimed he did it to inspire hikers, but some of the stones are different. Hidden deeper in the forest, etched with symbols no one has claimed responsibility for. Spirals, hooks, sharp-angled runes resembling those found in Marblehead and Dead Horse Hill. And then there are the faces. People don't talk about them much. They're harder to find. You have to wander off the trail. Some say the faces only appear at certain times, dusk mostly, or under fog. Crude carvings of white, staring eyes and slack mouths, sometimes yawning open in a silent scream. Dozens of them, all looking in the same direction, north. In 1997, a group of college students from Salem State were researching colonial settlements and camped overnight near the Babson boulders. They recorded audio during the night, hoping to capture natural wildlife sounds. What they caught instead was a low, rhythmic grinding, stone against stone, coming from multiple directions. Then laughter. Not human laughter. Not quite. Higher pitched. Hollow. They left before dawn. Their final journal entry read, "We found more faces. Too many. They weren't there before." The file was never published. One student later confessed he kept seeing those faces in his dreams, stone mouths opening wider each time. In 2012, a Gloucester native named Maria Eldred took her dog for a morning hike and got lost when the fog rolled in. Her dog, normally calm, began barking frantically at something beyond the trees. That's when she saw them. Two figures standing motionless between the trees. Human-shaped, but tall, elongated, covered in what she first thought was bark or mud. But as she got closer, she realized it was stone. Wet stone. As if someone had carved full statues and left them there to dry. One of them raised a hand and pointed. She turned and ran. Her dog wouldn't stop howling until they were back in town. For weeks afterward, she said she could feel pressure in her ears, especially when alone, as if someone or something was whispering just beneath hearing. The town chalks it up to imagination, overactive hikers, graffiti artists. But a recent drone survey of the area, done by a private mapping company, picked up strange topography beneath the surface. Not just rocks, chambers, geometric layouts, like foundations or tunnels buried long ago. Some appear to connect to no surface opening. One has a spiral structure within it, perfectly circular. One has a carved entry point, with steps. The company withdrew their findings shortly after and refused to comment further. But hikers claim the forest has changed. Paths don't lead where they used to. Compass needles refuse to point true north within certain areas. And sometimes you hear the dogs barking. Not real dogs, not anymore. Just the echoes. Some believe the residents of Dogtown didn't abandon the land. They went underground, down into the stone, where their ancestors carved faces as warnings, or perhaps invitations. Some say they still live there. Not alive, exactly. Not dead either. Watching. And waiting. And every time someone steps off the path, takes a wrong turn, or follows a voice that sounds just a little too familiar, another face appears in the forest, staring north, toward whatever's coming. If there is a true heart of darkness in Massachusetts, it beats deep within a strange slice of land known as the Bridgewater Triangle. Roughly 200 square miles, this region stretches between Abington to the north, Rehoboth to the southeast, and Freetown to the southwest. At its center lies the Hockomock Swamp, a name that means place where spirits dwell. in Algonquin. To those who've spent time here, that name is no exaggeration. The triangle isn't haunted in the traditional sense. It's not a single entity or spirit. It's a convergence, a pressure point, a place where everything goes wrong. UFO sightings, giant birds, shadow people, satanic rituals, disappearances, creatures that can't be classified, time that doesn't pass normally. The triangle contains them all, and something connects them. In 1978, a man named Joe DeAngelis was driving near Route 138 in Raynham late at night when he claimed he saw a massive creature cross the road. Not a bear, not a moose, something reptilian, 8 feet tall, grayish-green skin that shimmered like it was wet, yellow eyes, long fingers. It turned, looked at him, then vanished into the swamp. He refused to ever drive that road again. In the years that followed, more reports poured in, strange lights hovering silently over the trees, even following cars along desolate roads. Hikers entering the forest and emerging miles away with no memory of walking. A woman found her wristwatch had gone backward 3 hours during a short afternoon stroll near the Assonet Ledge. Children reported seeing tree people with long arms and no mouths. It's not just ghosts. Something deeper pulses beneath the land here. In 1992, 3 teenage boys entered the forest around Hockomock with a video camera, hoping to capture footage of the swamp monster a local paper joked about. Only 2 returned. The third, Eric Holland, was never found. His camera was discovered half buried in the mud weeks later, too damaged to recover most footage. But one frame was clear. Eric's face, eyes wide with terror, and behind him, barely visible in the background, was a tall figure. Too tall. Black. Undefined. Seeming to flicker, as if not fully part of this reality. His parents sued the state for negligence in search efforts. They eventually left Massachusetts. The boy's name became another in a long list of missing persons reports from within the triangle. In 2004, a journalist named Gwen Sato tried to write a piece debunking the triangle. She was a realist, a skeptic. She entered Freetown State Forest alone with a recorder, determined to spend the night there. Her notes were recovered the next day in her abandoned car. They were scrawled on the backs of napkins, receipts, a gas station map, anything she could write on. Over and over, the same phrases. It's not one thing. It's all of them. I heard them under the ground. The swamp is breathing. She hasn't spoken publicly since. Those who research the triangle seriously eventually stumble onto the same pattern, a geometric overlay of events across the region. Strange symbols found carved into trees and rocks. Stories of a vast underground chamber beneath the swamp. Rumors of a language heard in dreams. A hum so low it vibrates through bone. They trace the spiral. They follow the symbols. And they all disappear or go silent. One historian, digging through colonial records, found a 1671 letter written by a settler named Thomas Redfern. In it, he describes the Hockomock as a land bewitched, whose very air corrupted time and memory. He mentions a tribe that once worshipped a being beneath the swamp, one that came not from the sky, but from below the world. A god that whispered in floods, in fog, in sickness. The tribe vanished shortly after the letter was written. In modern times, even law enforcement avoids the deepest parts of the region. An officer in Taunton admitted off the record that the department has received multiple 911 calls with no return number, just static, followed by whispered voices. When traced, the calls always ping from the same area near the swamp. No cell towers exist there. No signal should even reach it. Even the animals know something's wrong. Rangers have found deer with eyes clouded over like they've been blind for years, walking in slow circles. Birds fly into trees. Foxes scream in the daylight. Dogs refuse to enter certain trails. And always, always, the spirals. Carved into bark. Burned into grass. Etched in frost on the windows of cars left overnight. The same spirals found in the tunnels of Marblehead. In the stones of Dogtown. Near the reservoir at Quabbin. They're marks. Warnings. Or maybe something worse. Signatures. Coordinates. Because the triangle isn't just haunted. It's linked. Connected by something older than towns, older than the land. And the closer you look, the more the pieces begin to fit together. Faces in stone, voices in water, lanterns in the fog. They're not random. They're all part of a signal. And somewhere beneath the muck of Hockomock Swamp, it waits. Not asleep. Not dead. Just listening. The mountains of western Massachusetts are quiet. Too quiet, some say. The Berkshires stretch out like the spine of an old, sleeping thing draped in forests and folded hills. Artists and retirees live here. Tourists pass through for fall foliage. But if you ask the locals, especially those who've been here for generations, they'll tell you about the bell. It doesn't belong to a church. It doesn't hang from a steeple. And it's not tied to any building still standing. It tolls only at night, deep in the woods. A single, long, hollow chime, like a morning bell striking in thick fog. You don't hear it often, maybe once or twice a year. But those who do, they always remember. And some never come back. The earliest account dates back to 1799, in a letter from a settler named Helen Bradford, who lived near what's now Tyringham. She wrote of a sound that woke her at midnight, a bell, though there were no churches nearby. She described it as a cold note that shook the trees and made the wolves stop howling. She followed it once, foolishly, into the woods. She returned the next day, but she was barefoot. Her nightgown was soaked. She was missing 3 teeth, and she never spoke again. More stories followed, scattered across the decades, always the same pattern. The bell, the compulsion to follow it, the disoriented return, or the complete disappearance. In 1936, a hiker named Charles Redmond went missing in October. The search party found no trace of him until 6 weeks later, when his journal was discovered tucked into the hollow of an oak tree. It had remained dry, perfectly preserved. His final entry read, "I heard it again. Closer this time. Not just a bell. A voice inside it." Below that, in smeared charcoal, "It called me by my birth name. The one I haven't spoken since I was 5. Charles was never found. But then, in 1972, a breakthrough, or so it seemed. A linguistics professor from Williams College named Dr. Elise Fontaine became obsessed with the phenomenon. She linked stories of the bell to Native American folklore, specifically Mohican tales of a mountain spirit that lived in the valleys and called people into dreams. She believed the bell was a form of infrasound, frequencies below human hearing range, often tied to feelings of dread and hallucinations. But her research veered off track after she began field visits alone. She went out into the forested ridges near October Mountain, trying to triangulate the bell's source. Her audio recordings were mostly static, occasionally faint echoes of something metallic. But the final tape, her last field recording, was different. It started normal. Wind, birds, her voice documenting time and coordinates. Then a chime, clear, deep, followed by silence. Then breathing. Then a voice, not hers, not human, whispering in a language no one's been able to translate. The voice spoke for 23 seconds. And then it said her name. Not Dr. Fontaine. Not Elise. but the name she was born with, Alisabetha. Her family confirmed it was a name she'd only been called as a child, and only by her great-grandmother, long deceased. She vanished the next week. All that was found in her cabin was her research. Maps marked with spirals, symbols identical to those found in the Bridgewater Triangle, and a sketch of a tower made of stone, buried in the mountains. At its peak was a rusted bell, fractured but still whole, hanging not by rope, but by long strands of black hair. In 1995, a group of survivalists claimed they found the tower. It wasn't on any map. They'd taken a wrong turn while tracking deer in the northern Berkshires and ended up on a ridge that didn't seem to exist. No birds, no wind. And there, through the trees, the outline of something massive. Not a tower exactly, more like a spine of black stone, curving upward, half swallowed by the forest. They never got closer. As they approached, one of them fell into a seizure. Another began bleeding from his nose. The last man, Dennis Hill, described hearing voices layered inside the ringing, like 100 people whispering underwater. He still doesn't sleep without the radio on. More recently, hikers using GPS-enabled apps have reported strange glitches while near the ridgelines. Digital compasses spinning, apps opening by themselves, headphones playing voices instead of music. One man even received a text from an unknown number. No message, just a voice memo. The memo was 4 seconds long. The sound of a bell tolling, and a whisper that said, "You were never supposed to leave." Researchers are beginning to theorize that the bell might not be a sound at all, but a signal broadcast in a way that bypasses the conscious mind. A kind of beacon, not from above, from beneath. It echoes through the land, bouncing off stone and root, awakening something buried, something older than Massachusetts, something buried before the colonists came, before the tribes, before time-worn names. The bell is calling more often now, longer, clearer, and across the state, the symbols are multiplying. On rocks, in frost, on basement walls, etched into the rusted underbelly of bridges. Faces appear where there were none. Roads twist. Voices murmur. The spiral tightens. The question isn't what's calling. It's when you'll finally answer. The storm had been predicted, but no one expected it to arrive the way it did. Silent, sudden, and wrong. No thunder. No lightning. Just black clouds that poured over Marblehead like ink over parchment. The streets went still. Dogs whined and refused to leave their porches. Cell phones glitched. Power flickered. And at precisely 3:17 p.m., every church bell in town rang simultaneously, though not one of them was hooked to a working mechanism. Locals who heard the bells said they didn't just hear them, they felt them. Deep in their teeth, their bones, like something resonating from the ocean floor. For those who'd lived here long enough, it was a familiar sound, one they tried to forget. Because that was the same sound heard the day the tunnels were first opened. The hidden ones. The ones no one speaks of above ground. It started back in the 1600s, when Marblehead was still young, still raw with superstitions and fears. Beneath the town, a network of natural caverns stretched into the stone. No one knew how far. Some claimed they connected to the sea. Others said they went deeper than the sea ever touched. The Puritans found the caves and promptly sealed them, chiseling a series of symbols into the stone, glyphs that matched none known in their language. Even then, they understood one thing clearly: whatever lived down there wanted out. Over time, the tunnels were forgotten, or rather, buried intentionally under layers of denial, construction, and whispered warnings. But now, in 2025, they've been reopened, not by men with shovels, but by something beneath them, rising. It started with sinkholes. one behind Abbott Hall, another outside Old Burial Hill, the third inside a long abandoned boathouse by the wharf. Workers sent to examine the damage never returned. And then, something emerged. Witnesses described it differently. Some said it looked like a man made of wet clay. Others saw no form at all, only a darkness that moved with intent. But everyone agreed on one thing. It whispered in perfect English, with a voice that sounded like someone they loved. Someone dead. And it said, "You've forgotten me. I remember all of you." Soon, strange things began happening across Marblehead. The air smelled of salt and iron. People saw flickering figures in the fog, half-formed, flickering, mouthing prayers in reverse. The oldest residents began sleepwalking again, muttering nonsense in an unknown tongue. Children painted spirals with black crayon, without ever being taught the shape. It was spreading. The bell from the Berkshires had gone quiet. But now a different sound filled the silence. A low, mechanical hum that pulsed under the streets. Machines malfunctioned. Water tasted like rust. The town's map, when overlaid with symbols from Dr. Fontaine's old research, revealed something horrible. The layout of Marblehead mirrored the carvings inside the stone tower she had drawn, the one where the bell had once hung by strands of hair. Except this one wasn't a tower. It was inverted. A well, a reverse spire, and at its center, an opening that led straight into the rock. That was where the last team disappeared. They were researchers, rogue investigators who believed everything was connected. Bridgewater, Dogtown, Quabbin, the Bell. They thought Marblehead was the convergence point, a place where the lines of the state's darkest secrets overlapped. The final known footage was recovered from a dropped helmet cam. It shows 5 figures descending into the earth, nervous, armed with flashlights and custom scanners. The tunnels are smooth, ancient, with walls carved in impossible angles. Some parts of the footage glitch, skipping time or showing shadows that do not belong to any of the 5. At one point, they pass a set of doors made of black stone, etched with those same spirals. The lead researcher mutters, "I think these are locks, not doors. This wasn't meant to open again." The camera goes black. When the footage resumes, without explanation, it's from much deeper in the earth. The team is gone. The light flickers, and something begins to crawl into frame from the left, impossibly tall, glistening, stitched from pieces of faces. Then it speaks. "You've seen it now. You can't look away." Then the camera melts. Weeks later, the fog returned to Marblehead. But this time it didn't leave. It settled over the town like a second skin, suffocating sound, muting color, and closing off every exit. The roads that led out of Marblehead began to loop. GPS failed. Locals who tried to drive out found themselves right back at their own doorsteps, often without remembering how they got there. Time, too, began to shift. Clocks froze or jumped forward. A woman claimed she was pregnant for 3 hours. A man said he'd been 12 years old again for a full day. The townspeople began to hear a voice on the radio. Not music, just static and a childlike whisper saying, "Dig deeper. You're almost there." And then, one by one, the symbols began to glow. Not metaphorically. Literally. Faint bioluminescence, like algae, but pulsing in sync across multiple locations. Abbott Hall, Old Burial Hill, the shipyard, the edge of the ocean, and at the center of it all, the old tunnel entrance behind the church, now exposed again after centuries, rimmed with claw marks and ash. Something is waking beneath Massachusetts. Every legend, every ghost story, every disappearance, they weren't separate. They were symptoms. It's all one body. One sleeping, forgotten thing, and Marblehead is the mouth. And now, the mouth is opening. The deeper we dig, the darker it gets, and Massachusetts has only begun to whisper its secrets. If you felt a chill, you're not alone. Like, subscribe, and comment what you think is hiding beneath the Bay State.